Sometimes you hear the expression, here's mud in your eye. I'm not exactly sure what that means or why it means what it means. But in John 9, Jesus puts mud in a man's eyes, a blind man at that. The Bible tells us in John 9 that Jesus and his disciples had come upon a blind man. From what's said in verse 8, presumably he was begging. That was pretty much the only way that someone of his condition could support himself in the first century. And then we read this very interesting thing after Jesus and his disciples had a little bit of a discussion about the man, that when he had said these things, when Jesus had said these things, he spat on the ground and made clay with the saliva, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And he said, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is translated sent. And when he went and washed, he came back seeing. You know, this almost sounds like a cruel joke. Yet we understand that it's not a cruel joke at all. And as I've contemplated what happens in this particular text, I have to understand that there must be some dialogue, some conversation between Jesus and the blind man that's not recorded here. I don't think Jesus just walked up to the blind man and started putting mud on his face or mud on his eyes. That would have been a terrible thing, and the man would have had a bad reaction. He couldn't see who was doing it or what was going on. So there must have been something there. In fact, when you read a little later in verse 11, when he's questioned about what happened to him, he says, a man named Jesus is responsible for my sight being given to me. So obviously they had some conversation with one another. And Jesus told him apparently he was going to put the mud on his face. And so he did it. And then he told him, go wash in that pool. You know, we sometimes use the phrase blind faith. Well, it certainly is blind faith here, evidence of things not seen. The man had to go and wash. You know, Jesus could have healed him instantly, but Jesus chose this somewhat unusual methodology to give the man something tangible. After all, the text tells us he had been blind since birth. He couldn't see anything. This gave him something tangible to then attach something spiritual to. And he attached it ultimately, as you read the rest of the chapter, to the right person, Jesus. Jesus healed the man of his physical sight. He gave him physical sight. When we look at what Jesus does for us today, he gives us spiritual sight to open the eyes of our spiritual